Welcome back to another episode of the S.E.M podcast. Jack Bryce here, and today we're joined by Devin Fisher. How you doing, Devin?
Good.
Probably most people will know you as M Fisher from the Mission.
I had that name for a while, yeah.
Yeah. So excellent. And you still look like M Fisher. I mean, he's even got the beard now too, so who's keeping up with who, I don't know.
He's following me.
All right. Well, Devin, start us off with how you got your call. If there's any story leading up to it or just finding out you're going to Scotland, what that was like.
Yeah, no. First, thanks for having me on. This is pretty new for me, new experience, and it's pretty great what you guys are doing. I know it takes a lot of time, and it's pretty neat to have these podcasts. So I've enjoyed listening to several of the missionaries I served around. But yeah, I grew up in Utah, Kaysville, Utah, very active area. And I always knew I wanted to go on a mission. It really was never a question of if I would go as much as just I knew I was going to go. And I wish I could say I was more prepared for it. But just being, like I said, just growing up in an active area, it was just something that was kind of expected of you, and I always wanted to do it. My father served a mission, but I only had two older sisters, and they didn't serve. So as far as how the mission works, that was all new to me. And growing up in Kaysville, we didn't have a lot of missionaries in the area because everybody was so active. So I really had no experience with missionaries, which was kind of interesting. But so yeah, I wanted to go on a mission as soon as I could after high school. I got my papers turned in. My stake president at the time actually worked in Salt Lake at the church office building, and he knew when the mission calls would be going out to the young men in the stake. So it was pretty much guaranteed. On a certain Wednesday, he would be hand delivering that call to our house. So that was pretty neat to know, when that was coming. But yeah, I didn't do any big production or anything. I had my family there, opened up the call just like everybody else. Scotland, Edinburgh Mission. And I knew right then and there, it was just like, that's where I was supposed to go. Like I knew I wanted to go foreign. And, when I saw Scotland, it was just like, that's where my ancestors are from. I mean, I've watched Braveheart. I mean, this is going to be the best mission, right?
Cool. Yeah. And what was the timing of that then?
So I think this was probably in about October of 2004, because I left January, beginning of January, right after Christmas, 2005.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so yeah, for those of you listening, Devin was in Zach's group for the MTC. So Zach will be joining us here, and we'll talk about that. But so
yeah, it's kind of a funny story there. So Zach had some connection in my stake. I think his mom had a brother or somebody that was in my home stake, and they found out that I was going to Scotland, and Zach's mom contacted my mom, and we actually met each other right before we left on our missions. He drove up to my house, and it was pretty awkward because we didn't know each other, but yeah, we had the same mission call and we were leaving at the same time. So that was kind of nice to know that, somebody was familiar.
Yeah. That every little bit helps, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So take us now to, I guess, January 2007. Got home. What you been up to for the last almost 20 years?
Yeah. What a ride. Well, the last little part of my mission, I knew I wanted to return home and go to school. And so I did register for Weber State University before I even got home. I think we got home like January 5th. First week of January, we got home. And I started my first semester like 2 days later. And it was just like general classes and things like that. So I jumped right into it, which was great. With the culture shock and everything from being home from the mission, it was just like you had to stay busy.
Yeah.
And getting right back into school and work was really good for me. But yeah, I did the whole university thing. I graduated with a degree in construction management. That would have been like 2011 when I actually graduated.
Great time for construction.
Great time. It was just picking back up, but that's part of the reason why I did that degree was, things were slow at that time. It was a good time to get in there. I grew up working construction. My father's a general contractor, so I always knew I wanted to be in that industry. And so if I could get a degree in that and still work in that, that industry, I just thought that was my calling in life. So I got my construction degree. About 3 months after I got home from my mission, I did meet my now wife in the singles ward. We dated for about a year before we got married. So we were married about a year after I got home from my mission, which was fairly quick. But when I first met her, she just got out of a relationship and really wasn't interested, but I just kept pursuing it. And eventually she let me take her out. And, we've now got 4 kids. My oldest is 14 years old and my youngest is 8. And I've got 3 girls and a boy.
Okay. So your youngest is a boy?
That is, yep. So we had the boy at the end and I've got enough kids now.
Good deal. That's great. And so you're doing that now, construction? And
I am. Yeah, I work for a home builder here locally, and we build houses and townhomes from St. George to North Ogden. So we're across the state. I've been, been involved in this industry for forever. So
yeah,
it's kind of just fell naturally into my career path, and it's been good.
Great. And you live in Kaysville?
No, I live in West Point, which is just north of Kaysville. So a little more of a farming community, not quite as busy. It's actually not too far from Antelope Island.
Okay. Cool. Very good. All right. Well, take us back to the mission. We'll skip the MTC right now. So you start when you got to Scotland. I was in the group that met you at the mission home, and I trained Zach. But start us there. Who were you assigned to, and where did you go? And we'll go from there.
All right. Yeah. So I remember being in the mission home and being assigned, my training companion. And it was Elder Clausen. So I watched his podcast, and he hasn't changed a bit. I mean, talk about just full of energy, right? I mean, physically and mentally, the guy was just ready to go. And I remember being up in that, I think it was the conference room. I don't know what we called that larger room upstairs.
Yeah, the upstairs office area.
Yeah. But I remember they called my name up. I met Elder Clausen, and I think there was a map behind us. And then they said where we were going to serve, and you kind of pointed to where you were going to go. And they said we were going to serve in the Govan area. So it's in Glasgow. And I remember the room kind of went silent when they announced where we were going. And I don't know if Elder Clausen knew at that time where we were going because we were whitewashing in. I'm not sure. But I just remember the room went silent because this area had a reputation, right?
Yep.
And it was just like, well, I guess this is where we're going to start. We're going to Govan, wherever it's at. I didn't know where it was at. And then the kind of funny thing was throughout that day when other elders were asking us where we were going, and we would say, oh, we're going to Govan. Again, they would just be silent. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? Like, what's wrong with this area? So we actually, as I said, we whitewashed in. We were given a car. The car was at the mission home, and Elder Clausen, he was over a year. He didn't have his license, so I had to drive. So it was just like a culture shock all at once, right? It was just like driving, new city, everything was just coming fast. And we made it to our flat there in Govan. And I mean, that was quite the adventure. I was a little concerned that we may not make it with me driving at first out of Edinburgh, but we made it.
That is pretty crazy.
We got lost a few times, and we got there. And it seemed like we got there pretty late. I feel like it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night when we arrived. And we walked up the stairs to our flat, and I thought it was a joke. So we opened up the door, and it looked like somebody had ransacked the whole flat. I mean, it was just like furniture was tipped over. I mean, there was so much trash everywhere that we couldn't even walk in. I mean, it was quite the shock. And I remember looking at Elder Clausen, and he's looking at me like, what's going on? Because it was a shock to both of us. But that flat was trashed. And I just couldn't believe that any missionary would have, a flat like that. So we stayed up probably for the next 3 or 4 hours, just trying to clean up enough stuff to where we could actually go to sleep that night.
My goodness.
But we got it cleaned up enough to where we could sleep that night. And the next day, we spent the entire day filling up trash bags, doing dishes. I mean, I had pictures of it just because it was so crazy how messy it was. And I think Elder Clausen and I counted like 30 or 40 garbage bags, and we would pile them up.
A literal tip.
Yeah, we had nowhere to put it. So we piled it up outside. And then what we would do is like every garbage day, we would go around and fill up all the neighbors' garbage cans with the garbage, just to get rid of it all.
Yeah.
So our first experience of being in that area was just, like I said, it was pretty crazy to think that we had to go through that. But we got that flat cleaned up, and the first Sunday we went to church, and it's actually the Pollack ward, not the Govan ward. It's called the Pollack ward, and it was probably more of a branch, if anything. But we had a meeting with the bishopric and the leaders of the ward before we actually, attended church, and I couldn't understand a single thing they were saying. I was just looking around the room, and I'm just like, Elder Clausen, do you get what these guys are saying? Because I don't understand the word they're saying, not one bit. I was just nodding my head. I think after about 10 minutes, they realized that I didn't know what they were saying. And I think Elder Clausen even struggled understanding them because they had a pretty thick, Glasgow accent.
Yeah. And
I think that was probably one of my more difficult areas to understand what the members were even trying to tell me.
Yeah, I think they actually slowed it down for us, right? If they were talking directly to the missionaries, but if they're talking to each other, that makes it even that much more difficult. Just the speed and combined with the accent and the vocabulary, everything very, very challenging.
Yep. But yeah, so Elder Clausen was actually the district leader in that area, and I think he was told that a lot of the elders in that district were struggling. I mean, they were a little depressed. I mean, it was winter, it was dark, they were in Glasgow, and it was kind of like, I remember him kind of saying, hey, as the district leader's companion, we're going to do a lot of exchanges. He's like, it's going to be our responsibility to help build these guys up and just try and, get them energized again.
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of exchanges. And again, it was just kind of like trying to get them all built up and get that district going again. And, I was a young, inexperienced missionary, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to teach any of the lessons. And like I mentioned before, I wished I was more prepared. I I kind of just thought that, hey, I want to go on a mission. I'll become a missionary and I'll be able to teach, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
And what a wake up call. But Elder Clausen was very patient with me. I think he even mentioned that his trainer put a lot on him pretty quick. And I think he took a different approach with me where he kind of helped ease me into it. And, you know, we took door approach a little slower. You know, I remember he would do the first couple of days of door approaches and I would ask him questions. And then eventually I'd kind of figure out how he was doing and what he was asking and how he was leading the conversations. But he did a really good job helping me just kind of get into that missionary mode of doing door approaches and things like that. But yeah, we did a lot of exchanges, and that was pretty fun. I think one of my first exchanges was with Elder Wright. He was from England. I think he was about a year out. But I went into his area and he's like, hey, you look a lot like a missionary I knew in the MTC. So Elder Wright actually was supposed to go to Russia. So he went to the MTC in Provo. But something happened and he ended up going to Scotland. He's like, hey, I met an elder in the MTC. He looks a lot like you. And I'm like, really? What's his name? And he said this guy's name, and it happened to be one of my best friends growing up. And I was just like, I can't believe that. And so he was pulling out pictures, and he was pulling out recordings of him and this other elder in the MTC in Provo that was one of my best friends. And I remember just thinking like, wow, this was kind of like one of those tender mercies that just came out of nowhere that just made me feel like I could do this as a new missionary, right? Just one of those connections just made you feel good for the day.
Yeah.
And then he also called me Elder S.E.M. So that started pretty quick. But Elder Clausen and we served for, I want to say, 2 transfers together. And we had quite the adventure there in Govan. I didn't have any expectations of, the area. So that's kind of all I knew was that area. And it was just, dealing with Neds every day and, getting rocks thrown at us and watching them vandalize cars in front of our flat out the window. And I mean, just, that's all I knew. But we were together for, looks like, about 2 transfers, maybe 3. And then my next companion came in was Elder Allen.
Okay.
And I think, his first name was Darren.
Yeah.
So he was in the mission home in the office. I think he was there for quite a while. And I remember when he came into the area, I think he was a little disappointed being in Glasgow. I mean, he tried to hide it, but I don't think he wanted to be in that area. But he put on a smile and he took it like a champ. So, but he was great too. I mean, all my companions were so easy to get along with. But yeah, Elder Allen, we only served together for about 6 weeks, and then I was eventually transferred from Govan. Well, before we go to my next transfer area, I wanted to talk about the ward. So they actually changed our area's name from Govan to Pollack because Govan was the old branch. Pollack was the current ward. And Govan actually had a bad reputation, obviously. So yeah, I remember Bishop McKechnie, he was the bishop of the Pollack ward. He told the mission president to change the name because it wasn't a good reflection of the area.
Rebrand.
Yeah, rebrand it. And I mean, that ward, every ward, there's a few solid members, right? They just kind of hold that ward together. And Bishop McKechnie and his family, I mean, they held that ward together. He had a couple of boys that, one that just got back from a mission. He was, I don't know, he did so many callings in the ward, probably ward mission leader. gospel principal teacher. He had a younger son that was about to go on a mission, and he, same thing. He had so many different callings in that ward, but they really held that ward together. And every week we would go out on visits, either with members or less active members, with the bishop and his sons. And he was just working so hard to try and, reactivate and keep people active in that area. I just remember that, just thinking, man, he's working hard.
Yeah.
And he was a bit of a stubborn guy. I know a lot of, later on in my mission, I kind of heard a lot of missionaries had a hard time with him, but I just have the most respect for him. I mean, for going out and meeting with all these less active members all the time. He just did a great job there. But we also, I had my first dinner appointment in that area. We didn't have very many, but we had one. It was in a really rough area of town. And it was probably in the council housing, and it was just four middle-aged women. And I mean, and the flat again was it was disgusting. I mean, it was just hair everywhere, and just, they had animals everywhere. And we ate there, I think, for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. They wanted to feed the missionaries. We went there for about 4 weeks in a row. And I think Elder Klaus and I both were just like, we can't go back. I mean, one, it was just like trying to eat that food every week was tough, but it also just wasn't safe. I mean, Bishop, he told us we weren't allowed to go in that area anymore either. So we had to break the news to them that we couldn't go there anymore. And I know they weren't too happy about that, but secretly, I think Elder Klaus and I were both pretty happy we weren't going back to have to try and eat that food in that flat again. But yeah, so after the Govan area, I was transferred. Let's see here. I got a few notes. Transferred to Alloa, and my companion was Elder Bird. And again, we were whitewashing in. And like I mentioned, I mean, I had really no expectations of what the area was going to be like, because all I knew was Govan. Yeah. And Alloa was about the exact opposite, right? It was next to Stirling, just a beautiful area. You had the Stirling Castle right there. I mean, almost exact opposite. And Elder Bird and I, we whitewashed into that area, and that flat, I think, was a sister flat before we whitewashed in, and it was spotless. It was spotless. And I was so excited that we weren't going to spend weeks cleaning it again. And I was probably a bit of a germaphobe. I mean, especially coming new into the mission, but I just remember that flat was already clean, and Elder Bird, we could just kind of get right to work. And, we didn't have a teaching pool or anything because we whitewashed in, but we got along really well. And he just had a way of talking with everybody. I mean, we could be anywhere, and it was just so fluid for him just to talk with anybody. And that ward too. I mean, that ward was strong. There was a lot of good members in that ward. The Stirling elders were in our ward. And I think at that time, when we first came into the area, Elder Jump, and I want to say Elder Rhodes, I think they were the companionship.
Sounds right.
And we just had a blast together. I mean, seeing them at church every week just kind of boosted your spirits, right? I mean, it was tough enough, chapping doors all day and being turned down and having few investigators and not teaching many lessons, but to have other elders nearby just really lifted your spirits. And that ward was fantastic. We had, I think, the stake president, he was in that ward. Let's see, I got a few notes over here. I want to say Elder Care, I think he was from that ward.
I think
Care
that's right.
family.
Yeah.
So we got to see them quite often. There was just so many good members there. There was the Banks family. They were a very active family, and they lived out kind of in the middle of nowhere, and they had us out for dinner one time, us and the Sterling elders. And Brother Banks, if you saw him, he looked like Porter Rockwell. I mean, he had just long hair, big beard, and he was just the nicest guy. And it was just one of the first families that I've met as a missionary. And it just kind of felt normal, right? And it was just great to have good members. That many members that actually fed you and took care of you, and kind of just helped you keep you in your missionary work. But Elder Bert and I, we chapped a lot of doors. We did find a young man that was baptized later on. He was fairly young. He was probably 17 or 18, maybe 18 or 19 years old. And we taught him every week while we were there. And I don't remember who actually baptized him. It happened several months later, but he did eventually get baptized. And that was one of my few investigators I can say that we actually chapped on his door and actually led to a baptism. So that was a great experience there. But that area was a lot of fun. We played basketball every week with whoever would get to play. A lot of the local guys would show up, and Elder Jump and I think Elder Rhodes, they had quite the crew of locals that would come out and play basketball with them every week on their P Day. And they would always try and turn that into, conversations and lessons.
Yeah, I think I was in Falkirk at that time and went and played with you guys at least once. The court, basically under the castle there.
Yeah, under Wallace Monument
cool.
Right there. Yeah, that was a blast. So, yeah, we were. So I was there for 2 transfers with Elder Bird, and then I got transferred again from there. Let's see here, to Dundee. So the Lift Ward, and that was with Elder Jason Canucci. What a blast that was. He was from Wales, and we would say he was a Welchanese, because I think he was Japanese but from Wales, and so he was a Welchanese. And he was fairly, I think he spent his first, so he was with Elder Pullen, I think Elder's trainer, and Elder Pullen left after 6 weeks. So that was the first time I was a senior companion, moving into that Liff Dundee ward with Elder Canucci. And I walked into an amazing teaching pool. I mean, it's the first time in my mission that we had investigators that were actually progressing. We had a family, the Petrie family, that they had 6 kids, and we were teaching them every week. And I don't know which missionaries found them. I don't think Elder Canucci was there when they were first contacted. Elder Pullen may have been there. But we taught them every week. And I mean, just talk about a golden investigator. I mean, we drove, so they lived quite a ways away from where our flat was. And we had a car in that area, and it was about a 45-minute drive out into the country. They lived in a farmhouse. And so we taught this family every week. And by the time I left that area, we had baptized the parents and their oldest child. But what a great experience that was. We also had another couple that, again, these are all investigators that I just walked into, and Elder Canucci and I we just taught them. There was another older couple that we taught every week, Ray and Janet Haddon, and they were probably in their 70s. And he was an optometrist as a career. So he was highly educated, which was kind of unheard of. I mean, to be teaching some of these people that were just educated and just, had careers, it was a little different than, some of the people we taught in the council housing.
Yeah.
And so we taught them every week. And I think within about 3 months, we baptized them as well. And I mean, again, it had nothing to do with, we helped progress them, but I mean, the missionaries that found these people and got them started, I mean, just amazing. And especially
awesome.
for us to walk in there and just teach them every week. I mean, they're ready to be baptized. We also had another investigator named Maureen Doyle, and what a character she was. She had this massive German Shepherd, and we would go into her flat every week to teach her, and that dog was so intimidating. I mean, just barking at the door every time we'd go up to this side. And I often wonder who was, again, we did not find Maureen, but the missionaries who talked to her the first time, I mean, they must have been pretty nervous when they went and tapped on that door and that big German Shepherd was just pouncing on it. Could have been pretty easy for them to, walk away, get away from that dog, but they didn't. And so again, we taught her every week, and we were not the companionship that baptized her, but I think about 6 months after probably about 3 or 4 months after I left the area, she was baptized. And, just another one of those great investigators from that area.
It's great.
So like I said, that ward, again, that ward was just nothing like the previous wards. That ward was large, a lot of strong members. The Campbell family, Dennis Campbell, I believe his name. He was the bishop right before I got there. Then he was released, but he took us out every week for lunch, and he would just do anything to help the missionaries get investigators and to teach whoever we could. We also had the Keogh family in the Lift ward. And I think almost every missionary knows that family. I mean, they were just a blast.
No, I completely agree with you, Dev, because the Keoghs were, President Keogh was so fired up about missionary work. And obviously with Ben getting ready to go on his mission, it made for opportunities for us to be in their homes and do a lot of fun things with their family. So it was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that ward was great. There were so many good families there that just supported the missionaries and just made our work so much easier.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, Elder Canucci and I, we served together, I think for about 4.5 months. And then he was transferred out, and I was able to train. So Elder Kilgore, he was my greenie. And we got along great from day one. I remember being at the mission home and thinking, you know what, that's the elder I want to train. And sure enough, that's who was called to be my greenie. It's Elder Kilgore. But I always wanted to play a prank on my greenie. I was able to train. And Elder Kilgore's, one of his first days in the area, we brought him back. We took him to one of our investigators' house she was going to, Maureen Doyle, she was going to get baptized. And so we had a good relationship with her. We saw her every week. But before we left the flat, I told Elder Kilgore, I said, okay, look, we're gonna pray over this map. We're gonna find a street to go chap doors on. We're gonna find us an investigator. And so we pulled out this map and we said a prayer, and I pointed to the street that the Spirit was telling me to go on, and I said, this is where we're gonna go chap. And he didn't know what the plan was, but we went and chapped on this street, and we got to Maureen's house, and Maureen knew what to do. I told Elder Kilgore, I said, hey, you go knock on this door. And so he went and knocked on the door, and again, the German Shepherd just pounced on this door. And I think he was a little nervous about dogs. And I said, no, he started walking away. I said, no, you get back up there. I said, we need to knock on this door. We need to talk to this person. And so he goes and knocks on that door again. And Maureen answers the door. And, she is just a very serious, just looking Scottish lady. And she just gives him this look like, what are you doing here? And she just starts going off on Elder Kilgore, and he starts backing away. And I'm like, you get back up there. You gotta tell her why we're here. and she starts letting him have it. And then so I start walking a little closer, because I was down a few steps, and I stand back up there, and I'm like, hey, we're missionaries from the church. We're here to baptize you. And I remember the look on Elder Kilgore's face. I mean, he's just like ready to faint, right? And then I couldn't keep it up anymore. So I just walked inside, and Colin's just like in shock, right? He's like, he didn't know what was going on. And I told him to come inside, and he still didn't get it. So we had a good laugh about that. I mean, that was my greenie prank that we played on him. And
that's so good.
Yeah, that was just hilarious. Couldn't have asked for a better prank to play on him. But yeah, Elder Kilgore was great. I mean, we had so much fun together. He was, I think he'd only been a member for about 3 years. So him and his family moved to Utah, joined the church, and he obviously he met with the missionaries. He knew what missionaries were all about. He knew how they acted, and he knew the lessons, and to be able to serve with him, and he could tell people he was a convert to the church. It just opened up so many more doors by being able to say that he was a recent convert.
Yeah, I'm sure that was huge.
But he had so much energy and ambition to baptize, and he came out of the MTC with the newer MTC president, not the one that we had, Zach. And they were taught, they were preached pretty hard that if you taught, if you stopped so many people and you taught so many lessons, you were going to get so many baptisms. And it was just like, it was all about the numbers, and it was just ingrained into his head that, we got to get these numbers. And I didn't want to be the training companion that was just like, Elder, that's not how it works. Like I can tell you, I've chapped on thousands of doors, and, we didn't get that many lessons and that many investigators out of it. I don't want to break the news to them. And we went on for about a week or two, just him just thinking that these numbers would hit these goals. And then he realized that it wasn't about the numbers. And I remember he was pretty frustrated when he learned that it wasn't quite that easy to get the investigators and to get the baptisms he wanted. But so it was, it was quite the experience, and we had a lot of fun together. We had a couple other elders in the ward that moved in. Elder Loganberg, and I think he trained as well.
Elder Boughton, I think
Elder Boughton
was his greenie. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to be pretty good friends with them, serving in the same ward, and our flats were pretty close. And so we were able to go on quite a few exchanges together, and we had a really good time. But so I was there in that lift ward for 6 months, and again, this was my third area, and it felt like home. I mean, it was a lot better than being in Glasgow, my first area. And I really did not want to leave the area. But at 6 months, I was transferred out. I went to Kirkcaldy, And Elder Kilgore, he ended up with Elder Aurelio. I think that's who he served with. Elder Kilgore and I, we only served for 6 weeks together. It wasn't very long. And I think it was a pretty big change for Elder Kilgore to go from serving with me to Elder Aurelio. I think
that's a big change.
Yeah, I think he took charge pretty quick. And I think Colin was humbled pretty fast serving with him. But I went to Kirkcaldy. I served with Elder Smith, so Garrett Smith.
Yeah.
And we whitewashed into the area. So that was my 3rd time already whitewashing into an area. And I can't say that's the greatest experience. Going into a new area where you and your companion don't know the members, don't know the area. I mean, it can be beneficial just because you have no expectations, or you're just open to everything in the area. But that was a challenge. Another whitewash. And again, the flat that the elders left for us was pretty in bad shape. And so, the typical, dishes in the sink and just garbage everywhere. So again, we had to clean the flat up and get it organized again. And I don't think Garrett was out very long. I don't know where he served before that, but like a lot of the areas and a lot of the experiences, I don't think he had a lot of experience teaching yet. And he was very, very determined to make this area successful. And we went into that area just, trying to find investigators to teach, chapped a lot of doors. And we did have another group of missionaries in our ward again, which was fantastic. I think it was the Glen Rothis area. That sound right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I think it was Elder Stuart Pattenden.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was pretty fun because I had the chance of serving quite a bit with his brother. Is it Chris Pattenden?
Yeah, that's right.
So Chris Pattenden, he served quite a bit around me in some of my areas, and I got to know him pretty well. And so when I found out it was his brother, in the same area, and that was pretty fun. I think he was with Elder Maddock at the time. So we had Elder Pattenden and Elder Maddock they were in companionship, and they were in Glen Rothis. And their flat wasn't ready yet. So I think they stayed with us for a few weeks before we got their flat ready. And I think this might be the same flat that I heard in that other podcast had some dodgy pictures on the walls and some dodgy books.
Yeah, I found that flat for him.
Yeah, I remember one time I was on exchanges, and I was in that flat, and I was sleeping on the floor. I don't know why, but I was sleeping on the floor in one of the rooms, and there was a bookcase there. And I look over, and just all of these inappropriate books. And I'm just like, we got to do something about this. So I think the next day we gathered up all the books and we put them up in the attic or something. I don't know. I tried to get them out of sight, but yeah, we had a good time. That ward was good too. The Kirkcaldy ward. There was a lot of good missionaries there, and that area. So I was actually the district leader in that area, and that was pretty overwhelming to be a district leader. I didn't think I was ready for it. It definitely forced me out of my comfort zone, and to try and be a district leader over missionaries that probably had more knowledge of the gospel than I did at the time. And I mean, that was pretty intimidating. But the part I liked about it the most was going on exchanges, getting to know other missionaries and just caring about them. I felt like was one of the biggest blessings of being a district leader. you know, you dealt with a lot of companionships that were having their struggles, but getting to know them and trying to help them through their issues. I mean, it was just, you know, maybe just because it just added more to your day than just chapping doors, but feeling like you needed to take care of other missionaries or be there for them, it just, it was a blessing.
Agreed.
But yeah, so Elder Smith and I, we were together for 6 weeks in that area. We got transferred out. I think he went into the office afterwards. He had some health problems that he was trying to figure out. And so I think they took him to the office to help monitor that and just try and help him get, you know, figure a few things out. And then I went down to Kilwinning.
Wow.
Is that right? Let's see. I went from Kirkcaldy to Kilwinning. And I was not too excited about that transfer. You know, we were in Kirkcaldy for just 2 transfers together, and Kilwinning got me closer to Glasgow. And I thought for sure if I get closer to Glasgow, I'll never get out again. And, you know, as much as I appreciated the experiences I had from my first area, it's like after seeing what else was out there, I just didn't want to go back to that area, right? So, but Kilwinning was not. It was not what. It was not bad. Kilwinning was a great area. It was on the other side of the coast from Kirkcaldy, and I remember it was summertime, and it was just the weather was fantastic down there. It almost felt like a vacation. We were right on the coast. It was warm, you know, and I was serving with Elder McLean from Arizona.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had him on yet or not.
He's been on.
But he was a fairly new missionary when I got down there. And, you know, again, we just got along great. I mean, he was eager to work, and it was just like they had a great teaching pool already set up, and he knew the members really well. I think he'd already been there for like 4 months. And so he knew the members really well. And I was ditch leader again in that area. And it really allowed me to focus more on the district. And he kind of took care of scheduling the appointments. He took lead on everything. And it was great. It took a lot of pressure off of me having to do everything. I mean, he really stepped up and just kind of led. I mean, he was a great missionary. And yeah, so we were there. I was there for 6 weeks with Elder McLean. And when I got the call that I was going to be transferred after 6 weeks, I think we were both pretty upset just because we were getting along so well. And I don't think Elder McLean thought that he was going to stay again. I think he thought he was going to go because he'd already been there it was his first area. He was already kind of there for 6 months. And so I think he was a little disappointed that I was already leaving and that he was staying again. But I was called back up to Dundee. I was excited. I already spent 6 months in the Lift ward, and now I was going back to the Bingham ward at Dundee, and it just felt like I was going home. I mean, I was pretty excited to go back. And my first companion there was Elder Hout, Trevin Hout.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I didn't know Elder Hout that well, but I knew he was a hardworking missionary, and he'd been zone leader for quite a while in that area, I believe. I think he served with Elder Fish or maybe Elder Rasmussen. I don't remember, but they were just, you know, fantastic elders in that area. So I was pretty excited to get into the Bingham ward and to serve with Elder Hout. And Elder Hout, I mean, we just had a blast. I think you had mentioned at one time he had that Gumby guy. He was very around.
You took the thought right out of my mind, Devin. That's amazing.
Every picture we took, The Gumby had to be placed somewhere in the picture. So whether it was like in somebody's suit coat sticking out or on somebody's shoulder, that Gumby was in every picture. And I don't know why he did it. I don't know where it came from, but we just did it.
It was very unique to Trevin. That's just who he was. It showed a lot of his personality that, you know, photos are for serious moments. But I remember looking at some pictures where as zone leaders, and I think it was when he was an assistant, you know, you take the pictures in front of the fireplace hearth at the mission home.
Yeah.
He's sitting next to President Frederick or something, and he's got the Gumby just sticking out of his coat pocket or his suit pocket, just holding it like his lapel. And I was like, that's Trevin to a T right there. It's really, it was so fun.
Yeah. No, again, it was just serving with him was fantastic. I mean, he had the greatest just personality. He could talk with anybody. Very dedicated to just working hard. And he took a lot of the pressure off my shoulders as far as just like, I felt like we were both working hard together. Not one of us was pulling the weight more than the other. It was just how a companionship should be, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, we had a good teaching pool. Yeah, I mean, it was fun to serve with him. We had another companionship in that Bingham Ward too. I don't remember who it was, but we had that ward started to get more and more missionaries. They started to flood the Dundee wards with more missionaries. And so while I was there, it went from just kind of us being in the ward to having a second companionship, a third companionship. And I think by the time I left the area, there was 8 missionaries in the ward.
Wow.
And I mean, again, when you're serving around other missionaries, I mean, it just lifts your spirits, right? You got to see them every Sunday. But Elder Howe, like I said, I learned a lot from him. He had a lot of patience. And I remember serving with him as a zone leader and just how many different issues we had to deal with. Whether it was missionaries disappearing and you had to go figure out where they went. You know, we'd get phone calls from elders being like, I can't find my companion. And they would disappear for the entire day.
Oh gosh.
You know, just doing different things. And his patience and his love just for the missionaries was just fantastic. There was one experience I remember. We were at a zone activity, and we used to do those big Dundee zone activities where we'd get all the missionaries there and we'd play all the different games, and we would bring food and this was shortly after anything that represented a gun was outlawed, right? It was banned from the mission.
For good reason.
Yeah. Yeah. The mission shootout. So this activity was right after that all went down. And we showed up to the chapel and this elder pulled out a squirt gun, you know, which was against the rules, right?
Yeah.
He pulled his squirt gun out, and Elder Hoppus looks at him like, Elder, you can't have that. You can't have that squirt gun. That's against the mission rules, you know. And this elder got pretty defensive. He's like, what do you mean? It's just a squirt gun. It's not going to cause any problem. And he's like, listen, you know what happened. President said you can't have it. You know, just put it away. And so he looked at the squirt gun and he looked at Elder Howe and he just turned that squirt gun to Elder Howe and squirted him right in the chest, you know. And Elder Howe just took it and he just looked at him like, I wish I could say something to you, but I'm not going to, you know. He just kept his cool, and that elder put his squirt gun away. But it was just one of those silly things where it's like, you know, was it a big deal? Probably not, but we were missionaries trying to follow the rules, right?
That's right. Very true.
So that was just one of my memories of being with Elder Hal and his patience that he had for everybody. But so yeah, he got transferred. We served together for 6 weeks. He got transferred out. I think he went to AP.
Yep.
Right after that. And I kept bugging him. I remember the whole 6 weeks. I kept bugging him like, "Hey, you're going to go AP." And he didn't like that. He didn't like me bugging him about that. And so he started this rumor with all the missionaries in the district that I was going AP. He started telling everybody this. And the missionaries were calling me up and saying, "Hey, I hear you're going AP." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so when calls came, you know, and I think with the APs, I think he went to the mission home, I want to say like 4 or 5 days before the transfer. They wanted him there. So word got out pretty quick after I was transferred to go, I think spend a week with some different elders. But he got a pretty good kick out of starting that rumor about me. The fact that anybody would believe that rumor was pretty funny, I thought. So Elder Stainton, he came into the area with me. He was from England somewhere. I think, what was his first name? David Stainton.
Yep.
I mean, what a cool guy. I mean, he I don't know how to explain him. I mean, he just was cool, right? If you ever served around him, he just, you know, he just one of those missionaries that everybody wanted to be like. And so I had to serve with him for a while. And again, at the same time, more missionaries were coming into our ward, into our area. And we had a lot of sister missionaries. I think we had maybe 2 or 3 sister missionary companionships in that ward.
Wow. And
one of them was teaching a less active member. It was over by St. Andrews. I don't remember. It was somewhere over by St. Andrews.
The Cooper area?
Cooper area. Yep, that's it. And I think at the time it was Sister Kenny and maybe Sister Kemp.
Yeah.
I mean, there was so many sister missionaries that served together, but I think it was them. And every week we would go and do these visits with them. Just less act. I mean, it was a family where the wife was a member, husband was not. Their oldest child was 11 years old, and she was coming back to church, and we wanted to get, you know, their kid baptized. And so we had to teach them the missionary lessons. And I think her name was Jackie Wright. But she had a sister that was active in Edinburgh. And so there was kind of a connection there. But so every week we would teach them different stories out of the Book of Mormon and things like that. And the sister missionaries came up with this. So the boys were kind of rambunctious, hard to teach a lesson. I mean, they just wanted to run around, right? They didn't want to listen to the missionaries. And so they would come up with ways to make it more entertaining for them. So they got this idea that we would dress up as characters out of the Book of Mormon and we would role play the stories with them. So
Yeah.
every week we were assigned a role to play in this discussion, and we were wearing headbands and we had props. And I mean, the sister missionaries just worked so hard, you know, to help these boys decide to be baptized. And I think they did eventually, but I mean, I just remember what a wonderful time we had with them, and having the sister missionaries around just brought a different perspective to missionary work.
Yeah, agreed.
But I think the other companionships, I made a few notes, but I think the other companionships they had, let's see here. I think it was Sister Lewis, Sister McFarlane, Georgieva, Sister Wellington. I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but it feels like we had all the sister missionaries at one point in that zone. And, you know, a lot of them were in that ward, that Bingham ward.
Mhm.
And then some of the members in that ward, I don't know if you guys ever heard of the S.E.Ms. The S.E.Ms were in that ward, the great family, Bishop S.E.M.
Yeah.
He had some boys that were, I think one of them just got back from a mission and a few others that were getting ready for a mission.
Yep.
But that area, again, that ward was just, it felt like home. Just fantastic members there. So I was there for 6 months. And then we're coming up to going home. I mean, we had 6 weeks left and then we were going home. So it was the end of 2005?
2006.
2006. So last transfer, I remember, at that point it was President Frederick that was there at that time.
Yep.
And the previous interview, I remember him asking me, "Where do you want to go? Like, you got 6 weeks left. Is there anywhere you want to go?" And I'm like, "Well, where do you want me to go? What do you think, President?" 'Cause at that point, it was just like, you had all the faith in the world in the president, right? It was just like wherever they wanted you to go, you're willing to go.
I already know what you're going to say.
So we chatted for a bit, and I wanted to know where he thought I should be my last 6 weeks. And he's like, "Well, I think we either want to keep you here or I want you to train again." And I'm like, "I can do either of those. That sounds pretty good. I can do either of those." And transfers come, and I'm going to Edinburgh, not to train. So I didn't see it coming. I was a little disappointed because I was in that Bingham ward for 6 months. We had 6 weeks left of our mission. It was around Christmas time, I felt like we had everything set up. So I was very disappointed I was getting moved right before I was going home. But it ended up being really good. Served with Elder Tomlinson in the Leith area there in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And I had not served in Edinburgh before, so that was a new experience for me. And there was like 16 missionaries in that ward. So going to church was it was crazy. There were so many missionaries, all the office elders, and it definitely had a different feeling because you weren't like the only missionaries. We were at that point, we were trying to do a lot of member missionary work, and a lot of the members were already spoken for from the other missionaries in the ward. The APs had their selection of members. The zone leaders had their selection of members, and the office elders, they had some of their members already. And I remember just being with Elder Tomlinson, and I'm like, "So who do you guys have?" I was new to the area. He'd been there for quite a while. I'm like, "So who's our members?" He's like, "We don't really have any." I think it was just like we were the forgotten missionaries in the ward. And I mean, it's just a totally different experience. And so it was around Christmas time, and I think all we did was chap doors, and we tried to do some member missionary work, but again, all the solid members, they were spoken for. And this is kind of funny, but there was one member in that ward that was really solid, and her sister was the member up in Dundee with the sisters that I had been helping them teach.
Yeah.
And I think she called down to her sister in Edinburgh and said, "Hey, Elder Fisher's down there. I want you to invite him over for dinner one night," And again, it wasn't our members that we were supposed to be visiting. And Elder Tomlinson was like, "That's not our members." And I'm like, "I don't care. They invite us to dinner. We're going to go." Like they would pass around the dinner schedule every Sunday in Edinburgh ward. And it was like every companionship on there had like 6 dinners, it seemed like. And then Elder Tomlinson and I had like nothing. And so when she called and invited us to dinner, I'm like, "We're taking it. We're going," So we ended up going over there, and I think it was the AP's member, and they caught wind of it that we were over there, and they called us up, and they were asking all these questions like, "Why are you over there?" And I'm like, guys, we're just here to have dinner. You know what I mean? Like, we're not taking your members away from you, but I just remember it was just hilarious the way that they reacted to Elder Tomlinson and I going over there for dinner. And it was one of the few dinner appointments we ever had while we were there. But there was a lot of young missionaries in that area. Chris Frainer.
Yeah.
He was a young missionary. He was in that area. And he served with, I think it was the other Elder Smith, I believe. I don't remember his first name.
Is it Jesse?
I feel like he was from England. I don't remember his name, but
we'll figure it out.
But yeah, I mean, being in Edinburgh, and it was around Christmas time, and it was just like there were a lot of missionaries there. We had a lot of fun together. We were kind of the two companionships that didn't get a lot of members to go visit. And so we ended up spending more time in the evenings together, having our own dinners together. And I mean, it was a good experience for sure.
Yeah, that had to be so tough. I mean, I didn't serve in Edinburgh, and Jack barely served in Edinburgh as far as the zone, right?
Yeah, the Barry.
Yeah.
But man, like, I can't even imagine what that experience would be like, being in a ward that's just overly saturated with missionaries to the point where you're having to say who's your members. Like, that doesn't
Yeah.
It sounds like a foreign world to me, and the experiences that I had in other wards. So I'm glad I didn't have to experience that.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely was interesting. And honestly, I wasn't ready to come home. But that experience at the end kind of was like, okay, I guess I'm ready to go home. Like, this is kind of like my way of getting like worked out of the mission. Like,
Yeah.
It just felt like, okay, now I'm ready, And again, the bishop in the Edinburgh ward was great. He was a younger guy, and his dad, I feel like, was in the bishopric in another ward that I served in. And he talked to me a few times, and I mean, he made a point to recognize all the elders in the ward. He recognized it, but I definitely felt bad for Elder Tomlinson because he'd been there for a while, and I think most of his previous companions were his last companions. So he trunked out several missionaries, including myself.
Yeah.
And that's got to make you a little homesick, I mean, those last 6 weeks, it's always tough to stay focused, and I'm sure some missionaries did, but others, they were done, right? So, for Elder Thompson to have to experience that with so many missionaries, and that must have been pretty tough for him. So I remember trying to still work hard with him and make it look like we weren't giving up towards the end there. But I went home, and he went on to a different area. So he got a new experience after that. But
Crazy. Well, I know that I was late in arriving to the podcast tonight, but I just wanted to reflect with you, Devin, on how we met. I mean, I don't know how we got connected, other than I think so my aunt and uncle live in your state, I think and they caught wind that someone else was going to Scotland at the same time, and they arranged a meetup. And I remember it was kind of an awkward exchange because it's like, hey, nice to meet you. Cool. See you later.
Yeah.
It was definitely nice to have a familiar face when we got to the airport, and it was yourself and me and Spencer Streeter. And we were just like, all right, let's go on an adventure together for 2 years, which is kind of how it all started. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that in the beginning, that we were able to meet each other before our mission. And I said the same thing. I'm like, it was kind of an awkward, like, well, we're both going to the same mission. You know, that's pretty cool. But I remember when I got to the airport, because we flew straight out, you know, I remember seeing you there and Elder Streeter there. And just the fact that we had met before, I mean, it was a little comforting.
Yeah, agreed.
And we didn't talk about the MTC because we wanted to wait for you to come on. But
yeah,
I remember that plane ride to the MTC. It seemed like it lasted for days.
I still look back, and we've talked to so many people who took the flight to like Chicago or Atlanta, and then had the flight over the pond. And we went to Dallas, if you remember.
Yeah.
And then we flew from Texas to Manchester. I mean, that's a long flight in any semblance. Yeah. It was just.
I feel like
not my favorite.
I feel like we missed one of our flights too. We had a connecting flight somewhere.
I think you're right. I mean, I think it was, though. It had to have been that flight from Dallas, because we flew from Salt Lake and.
Yeah, we missed it, and we had to catch a different flight. And by the time we got to the MTC, I feel like we were like some of the last missionaries there. We came in way late, and I was exhausted. I don't know how you felt, but I was just like, I mean, we landed, and culture shock and jet lag, and I couldn't even think straight.
Yeah,
I mean, it was wild. And as soon as we got to the MTC, I remember whoever picked us up mentioned they were waiting for us to, you know, they knew we were late. As soon as we got there, I think we were thrown right into like a devotional or something. And at that point, you know, we hadn't slept for 24 hours, it felt like.
Oh, easy. Yeah, easy.
I mean, the entire MTC experience for me was a blur.
Agreed.
I couldn't sleep at night because my you know, the jet lag and the time difference threw me off.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like being face to face with one of the instructors trying to teach a lesson, and I was just falling asleep. And then he would kind of just nod me like, elder, and I'm like, what just happened? What just happened?
Oh man.
So I mean,
no, I mean, it's nice to talk to someone who had that same experience, because the MTC was such a fog that I think the thing I remember is we got picked up at the airport. They put us in the minibus and took us to the MTC. And I remember we had initial interviews with President Boudin. And I still faintly remember this, but he asked me at that point, he's like, I'd like you to be the district leader. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? You know, because first and foremost, I don't know what that entails. Two, I can barely understand why we're talking about this right now, because I'd like to be in bed. And I think you're right. We went to that devotional, and Sister Boudin said to us, all right, for you Americans, I'm going to guarantee that you're going to wake up at 3:00 in the morning and be wide awake. I remember shaking my head like, you give me a pillow, I probably won't wake up for a few days. And 3:00 came around, and I was wide awake, and I could not go back to sleep. I think I laid on my bottom bunk bed in the MTC, just stirring for the next couple of hours. Like, I really want to be sleeping. Why am I awake? It was so bad.
Yeah. And if you remember, we had 2 small districts in the MTC, like 15 of us.
Yeah. I mean, at most, because you had like 8 of us that were going to Scotland, and then there was a handful of like Swiss German missionaries that were going, and then the others were going to Leeds and Manchester, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was a small group, and I wish I could have gone back like and experienced MTC, not so tired and in culture shock. Because again, it was so hard to learn in that environment when it was just like you couldn't even stay awake during the day.
Yeah. It'd feed you and then tell you to go sit in a classroom for the next 5 hours until the next meal. And that was really, really challenging.
Yeah. But Elder Barber was my MTC companion.
That's right.
And, I remember, I mean, he was from England, and his accent I didn't think was very thick at the time, but I still couldn't understand him.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I remember how many times I told him, like, dude, you gotta slow down. I don't know what you just said. But we got along great. I mean, it was, you know, he would ask me questions about America, and just I'd ask him questions about in England, and you know, we got along really well in the MTC together.
Yeah. No, you guys were a fun companionship. I love Elder Barber. He's one of my favorite people in this world. So you definitely got a good one there.
Yeah, I never got to serve around him again in the mission. I mean, there was a few missionaries that they were always in a different zone, and he was one of the few I never saw on the mission.
Yeah.
And then there was other missionaries that, even though I didn't serve with, it's like I was always serving around them, or, you know, it seemed like we're all on exchanges all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about it, and Craig Rasmussen, he's one of those missionaries that we didn't serve together, but it felt like we did, because I think we had exchanges almost every transfer of my mission. It was just like, whether he was district leader or zone leader or something, it's like we always had these exchanges. And so I got to serve quite a bit of time around him. And again, we were never actually companions, but
yeah,
he was just always around.
No, I agree. I mean, I think of the missionaries that I spent the most time with from our MTC group, I had the fortune of being in the same ward with Elder Pilkington for 4.5 months. I know it was longer than that. It was 6 months now I think about it. And the last 6 weeks of that, Elder Barber was his companion. So it was a lot of fun to be around both of them. And then the other person I spent the most time around was Elder Loganberg. You know, he was in Dundee when I was in Montrose, and then again when I was in Hamilton. I think he was in like Bathgate down in Glasgow. So it was really fun just to have those camaraderies and people that we're familiar with. And speaking of Loganberg, do you remember our 1 year our shirt burning that we did up in Montrose? You remember that sleepover we did?
Oh, I remember it. I remember it because I'm pretty sure Loganberg was the district leader at the time.
I think he was.
I think he was. So you know, we were in the same ward, and I thought, well, if he says it's okay, it must be okay to do.
Oh man, we went and got like Schlur, and we all had our Dundee the zone hoodies that we had made, or that Elder Clausen and Elder Allen had made, I think. And man, that was a fun night. We partied like it was our year mark. It was fun.
We burned a few shirts. I remember that. And I didn't even know that was a thing, but I'm pretty sure you told me to bring a shirt to burn.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember who told me, but it was like burn a tie at 6 months, a shirt at a year, like a pair of trousers at 18 months, and you're supposed to burn a suit like right before you go home. But yeah. I can tell you, I did 3 of those 4 things on my mission.
Yeah, I didn't have a suit to burn. I needed every suit I had, but I mentioned earlier that I served around Elder Loganberg, and you know, he was in our group, right?
Yeah.
And he had a lot of energy too. I mean, he was just always happy, just talkative, and he was just the nicest guy, right? And I remember just being like, is this guy for real? Like, is he really this nice all the time? Like, is he just outgoing all the time? And so I was a little hesitant about like opening up to him, being like, okay, is he, you know, is this really who he is? But when I got to serve with him in the lift ward, I mean, I think those barriers came down, and I just realized this guy is genuine, right? He really cares about everybody, and this is him. Yeah, and I really got to know him better, and I mean, he's one of those missionaries I really enjoyed serving around.
Yeah, agreed. He knew how to have fun when the time was right to have fun. But when you're in an opportunity to teach or to, try and find an investigator or whatever, he was very, very on point and did exactly what he needed to do. He was very a good missionary.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely one of those missionaries that just knew the doctrine. And,
Yeah.
I wish that was me. I wish I would have been more prepared to where I knew all that stuff. But, those missionaries always stand out. The ones that just knew the doctrine, knew the lessons. And eventually I figured it out. And I think because I didn't have as much knowledge as some other missionaries, I may have taught a little simpler because I didn't know all of the, all the deep doctrinal stuff.
Yeah.
But it definitely took me a long time to get the courage to, to teach those lessons, to feel like I was adequate enough to be able to teach the gospel. I mean, it was no easy task to teach people you didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I know I missed this part too, but did Jack bring up the M and beatboxing with Clausen?
We brought it up. I remember it started in the MTC. In the MTC, somebody said I looked like Eminem, and I think in every area I went to, it kind of followed me around. Elder Slim, and
that's right.
There was one night in Govan where these Neds were kind of harassing Elder Clausen and I, and one of the Neds is like, "You look like Eminem," and Elder Clausen's like, "That's his brother," and I mean, we were so exhausted, and like, when you're dealing with Neds all the time, it's just like, I don't know, you got to do something, right? And so Elder Clausen went off on how he was my brother and how, we were both from America. So because I was from America, they believed it.
Yeah.
And before I know it, they were asking for signatures, and Elder Clausen was having me sign pass along cards and hand them to all the Neds,
Oh my gosh. That's so good.
But
one of my favorite stories.
I mean, what a roller coaster ride, though. I mean, you have the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in the mission. And you tend to find these kind of funny, simple things with your companions just to kind of have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
And I think every companion, we did something that was kind of strange. I mean, Elder Clausen, he would collect rubber bands.
That's right.
Every door we chapped on, there was probably a rubber band on the ground somewhere, and he'd collect it. And by the time we chapped for, I don't know, a month or two, he had this massive rubber band ball that he had made.
Awesome.
So, I mean, just so many funny things that you do with your companions to kind of pass the time and just try and keep your spirits up, even when people didn't want to, hear the gospel from you. But
right.
I do have one funny story about Elder Clausen, though, because I mentioned that he was just full of energy. And I remember one of our first few nights that we were sleeping in our flat together. All of a sudden I hear this, Elder Fisher, Elder Fisher, Elder Fisher. And I look over in the dark, and there's Elder Clausen sitting up in his bed. And he's like, "I bet my duvet is faster than yours."
What?
He was sleep talking.
No way.
He sleep talked all the time, and I had no idea. But I mean, it was like one night he was racing duvets, and he would just start talking to me in the middle of the night. I mean, it happened almost every night. And I was a pretty light sleeper, so I started sleeping with earplugs every night. And I think I kept that up my entire mission. I had these little foam ear pads that I would put in my ears every night.
Yeah.
Because, but yeah, Elder Clausen, he just talked all the time in his sleep, and it was just hilarious. I would tell him the next day, and he wouldn't believe me.
We'll have to We'll have to see if Trent listens to this. We'll have to ask if his wife can confirm that this is still something that's happening in their life. That's pretty funny.
I bet it does. I bet it does.
Oh man, that's so good.
Mhm. So Devin, what memories do you have? I mean, you told a couple stories, but President Sister Vrains and then the Fredericks after that.
Yeah, I mean, President Sister Vrains, wow. I mean, they were our mission parents, right? I mean, Sister Vrains, I mean, obviously her Miss Piggy speech that she would give at Zone Conference.
Yes.
I mean, that was always entertaining. But I mean, whenever you talk with Sister Vrains, you just knew that she loved you. I mean, it's just like to see her come in and give you a hug. It was that mission mom, right? And I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better, mission mom. I mean, she cared for everyone.
Agreed.
And whenever you saw her and President Vrains, I mean, you just felt so much better. But President Vrains, I mean, you could never forget his massive bear hugs he would give, or his interviews where it looked like he was staring into your soul. I mean, I thought for sure this guy knew everything about me. Every time we had an interview, I'm like, he sees right into my soul and he knows everything.
Yeah, I can concur with that.
I mean, he just so intimidating at first, but I mean, I assume he did this with every elder, but in the interviews, he would sit pretty close to you. Seemed like he would be like just almost your knees are touching. And then like partway through the interview, he would just like slap you on the knee and make some comment to you, and just like wake you up and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? Or he would make a comment about how, oh, this is the famous Elder Fisher. He always said, this is the famous elder.
Yeah.
Yep.
He liked to use the word rubbish a lot. Seems like he'd always say, that's rubbish, I think I wrote in one of my journals like the phrases that President Vrains always used. I did it. I wrote a few down. He'd always say like, hey, good looking. Or maybe he would say, I think the one he told everybody is, you're going to be a leader someday in this mission. He loved to build you up in those interviews. And I didn't like to talk too much at first with him if I didn't know him. And I didn't really open up very fast, but it seems like as time went on, he knew how to pry it out of me and kind of ask me how I was doing. I'd always say I'm fine, I tried not to show too much emotion on my mission. It seemed like, my first area was so difficult as far as just not being what you expected. It felt like I tried not to be overly excited or depressed. I tried to just kind of go through the mission, just even kill the whole time. And I don't know if that's really the best way to do it, but, I had a lot of companions that were, up and down a lot, and it was exhausting, to see him go so high and then the next day just to drop so low. I mean, it was tough to be around, but President Vrains, he knew how to build you up. Every time you saw him, he knew how to find out how you were really doing. And I mean, he truly cared, again, just about the missionaries.
Yeah.
And it was pretty tough. When he left, it was pretty tough. I mean, for us that pretty much knew him most of our missions, I mean, you kind of wondered, how was the mission going to continue without him, right? I mean, you knew it was going to go forward without him, but, it just kind of it just didn't feel right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I mean, I think you remember this, that, before President Vrains left, they announced that President Summerhays was going to be our mission president.
That's right.
And he was I don't know if it's from Farmington or Kaysville, pretty near where I grew up. So I knew him.
Yeah.
I knew his one son that played golf. So, for months we were kind of expecting that he was going to be our mission president. And then when we found out it wasn't going to be him, it was like, wow.
It was a big surprise.
But, it was a change for the mission. I mean, that a lot of elders, they didn't know what to do, I think, when President Green left. But when the Fredericks came in, I mean, I didn't get to know them too well. I didn't serve around them very much. But they were just down to earth, right? They wanted to get involved with missionary work. And they definitely shook things up. I mean, I remember when they came in and one of our first zone leader conferences, I remember President Frederick was kind of saying, hey, it doesn't matter who the leaders are of the mission. And I think to prove a point, he started shaking things up. I mean, you might be zone leader one transfer, the next transfer you weren't. And then you might be training next. I mean, he shook it up. I remember he caused quite the stir with a lot of missionaries because, they weren't used to it. But he meant business. He meant business. He wanted baptisms, and he wanted the elders to work hard. And I remember President Breen's, when missionaries make mistakes, President Breen's, he might get after them, but he was forgiving, and he wanted them to stay in the mission, right? I mean, he wanted them there. And I remember President Frederick, he didn't want to put up with missionaries that weren't working. I mean, when I recall, it's like if you weren't working hard, he wanted to know why you were still there. And I feel like there was a few missionaries that went home pretty quick after he came in. And honestly, I tried to follow the mission rules pretty strict, and probably a little too strict at times, but I admired that he wasn't going to put up with missionaries that weren't working.
Yeah. Agreed.
But I mean, they were just down to earth people. And I did have the opportunity to have dinner with them one time when I was in Edinburgh my last 6 weeks. They felt bad for me when I had a little incident where I had to get some metal shavings removed from my eye.
Oh, that's right.
So for some reason, I had some metal that blown into my eye, and I had to go get it taken out. And Sister Frederick found out about it, and they invited us over for dinner that week. And again, Elder Tomlinson and I, we were like, "Wow, this is pretty special. Like, we don't get invited to dinners around here." So,
Gosh.
I think Sister Frederick thought I was probably a lot worse off than I was. And they almost looked a little disappointed when they found out that my eye was healed up within a week or so. It wasn't that bad, but it was the thought that counts, right? They invited us over, and we got our dinner. And
Gosh. But
yeah, I mean, it was, like I said, the mission president and their wife. I mean, it was just, they knew how to build you up and be that support system for you on your mission.
Yeah, agreed. Well said.
Well, Devin, thanks for taking us on that journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
We really appreciate
awesome.
your time. Just keep rolling on this. So anybody else you want to shout out that we can try to get on here?
Have you had, I don't know if you've had Trevin Hout on yet. I'd love to hear from him.
We're working on him. Shout him
Working
out.
on him.
Tell him to get his butt on here. We'd love to have Trevin.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him somehow. I'll find a way.
Sounds good. He's usually pretty prompt when I message him on Facebook, so give that a try.
Okay.
You got
thanks, guys.
You got to help us get in touch with Colin Kilgore too. If you're still in touch with Colin, we'd love to have him on.
I'll reach out to him. We stayed in touch quite a bit after our mission for the first few years, and then he moved off to Texas, and we haven't kept in touch as much since then. But
yeah, you could help us with him. Dave Stainton is another one who keeps kicking the can down the road on me. So, you've got some good companions and people you've been around the mission that if you feel so inclined, reach out to them and let them know that we'd love to have them.
Yeah, for sure.
Good deal.
Well,
All right,
thank you, Devin.
Thanks, guys.
Love you, brother. Thanks for your time tonight. We'll see you soon.
Appreciate it. See ya.
All right, cheerio.